Yeah, so it'd be awesome, Joey. Like we have Joey, he's the CEO of Cytonics, and he's gonna introduce himself. We're gonna have his link underneath this video, and if you're listening in the show notes, go ahead and give him a follow. Joey Bose, CEO of Cytonics. You do have a LinkedIn, right? I think that's where we connected.
Yeah, yep.
Okay,
Yeah, you can look me
perfect,
up on
perfect.
LinkedIn. Yeah.
See, LinkedIn is the tool, guys. Let me tell the Guru Nation how I found you first, because I think it's exercise in how people can use LinkedIn effectively. So my PI, Dr. Smith at Yuma Clinical Trials, randomly, like at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday, sends me this photo screenshot of this article he read about Joey's company, Cytonics, and he circled it with his like picture editing thing and said he wrote clinical trial question mark. And so he wanted me to find out more about this company, which is amazing when you have a PI that's that involved, by the way, and that interested. And it's actually Joey that speaks to your company. Like it's kind of rare. He's very skeptical. My PI is like extremely skeptical about pharmaceuticals. He's a community clinician, but I mean, I've seen the way he talks to sales reps. He's like, yeah, yeah, you guys giving us poison. I mean, he's kind of joking with them, but also serious. So
Mhm.
for him to send me your company info in order for us to try to work with you guys says a lot. And he's big into the peptide space. Like he studies that little niche. And it's interesting to get into that as well in this interview. But anyways, he sends it to me. So I look up Cytonics, I see the website, and then I go to LinkedIn and I just put Cytonics in there. And then you pop up, CEO. I said, okay, perfect. Who better than the CEO to contact? So I message you, and within about an hour, you messaged me back, and we were on a Zoom call the next day.
It's that
S-
simple.
Sometimes, guys, like LinkedIn is that simple, and there's no need to spam. Like I just sent him a few sentences, basically the truth. Like my PI alerted me to you guys, and so that's how we connected. And now we're on this podcast. So just a quick lesson on how to use LinkedIn effectively. But Joey, thank you. And maybe we could start first with why is my physician so excited about what he read about you guys?
Sure, sure. So, one of the reasons that he might have found what we're doing a little more credible is the fact that, we've already in a clinical setting shown that our core technology works, right? And what we're doing is really analogous to what Genentech and Eli Lilly did with recombinant insulin in the 80s, meaning that we're creating a recombinant modified form of a naturally occurring protein or peptide. In Eli Lilly's case, it's a peptide. In our case, it's an actual protein, three-dimensional structure. And that we already know has some sort of endogenous function naturally that we can then leverage to be able to apply in other settings, right? So essentially what we've done is we've created a recombinant variant of the naturally occurring alpha 2 macroglobulin or A2M blood protein that in its natural state plays a role in blood clotting as a protease inhibitor. Well, it turns out that if you can purify and selectively concentrate this A2M protein from the blood, it also has therapeutic function as a protease inhibitor against the major proteases that are upregulated in arthritic joints. And so what we're
Interesting.
doing is we're in the same way that Eli Lilly did with creating the recombinant insulin, we've created a tweaked version in which we've made some careful genetic modifications. Only 31 amino acids have changed out of a 720 kilodalton protein. So honestly, it's a very, very, very small percentage of the actual structures change, but that's all that was needed to be able to change its affinity for certain proteases. And there are three major classes of proteases that are responsible for cartilage degradation in arthritic joints. And so we were able to fine tune this protein to be able to increase its potency, its affinity, its binding coefficient against these specific proteases while maintaining broad spectrum efficacy. Broad spectrum anti-protease activity, which is important because osteoarthritis, its molecular etiology is not like linear, it's not single factorial, it's multifactorial. So there are multiple proteases that become upregulated, three major classes, but also some some more general serine threonine proteases that still have some underlying activity that are also responsible for cartilage degradation. So the long and the short of it was that we needed to come up with a way to increase this molecule's potency against some specific proteases, but also maintain broad spectrum activity. And so that's what we did. And what we, in a pithy way, we captured the genius of nature, and we simply improved on nature's design. Nature already had built this molecule. We figured out a way to modify it to make it better and leverage it to play a therapeutic role in our disease focus area.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I was going to ask, since this protein, or at least your investigational product, is based on a naturally occurring protein in the body, this naturally occurring protein does not have any effect on knee joints, right? Like,
yeah, so that's the thing. It's that it's produced in the blood. It's found in the blood. Most of it's produced in the liver, but you don't really see it in high concentrations in the synovial fluid. I don't even know if you see it at all. It's a very large blood protein, so it's 720 kilodalton. So the chance of it passively diffusing into the synovium is very small. So the joint is encapsulated by a thick membrane. I don't even know if it's, I highly doubt that there's A2M within the joint, which is why when we were able to purify it out of a patient's own blood and selectively concentrate it and inject it into the joint, that's where we saw therapeutic function. That concept was employed in our first generation technology, which is a medical device that's been FDA approved. It's been in the market since 2015. And the clinical and commercial success of that device is a testament to A2M's power as a therapy for osteoarthritis, and is what gives us the great confidence to move forward with our synthetic recombinant variant. This, what we're calling Site 108, is an homage to the name of the company. That's what gives us confidence to move forward. And in our minds, it's that the development of Site 108 is significantly de-risked by the fact that we've been able to successfully purify, selectively concentrate, and inject directly into the joint the naturally occurring A2M, and been able to see that it'll actually heal or protect patients' joints against further cartilage degradation.
We'll get back into Cytonics because I'm curious about what's already approved and commercialized in your guys' portfolio. But how did you get involved in all this? Like, what's your background? And you're embarking on potentially doing more clinical trials now, and that's why we were talking off camera. But how did you get thrown into this? You're from Wall Street initially, right?
No. So my background is actually in biomedical engineering. So I spent almost 10 years, in academia, as working in the fields of systems biology and proteomics. So really heavily quantitative biomedical engineering at the University of Virginia, and then at Johns Hopkins. And I was in a doctoral program, and I was studying one gene, PTPN22. It's a phosphatase. And I remember thinking, what am I doing here? Like, this is so myopic. I don't really even understand, like, who's going to appreciate this or read this. And truth be told, I'm not trying to hate on academia, but listen, vast majority of people, the overwhelming majority of publications in any field in academia, it doesn't matter across the board. This is agnostic to the focus area. The number of people that read what you write are under 10. There's under 10 people in the world that are reading your publications, unless you are a rock star that's publishing in Science, Nature. I published in the #1 proteomics journal in the world, molecular and cellular proteomics. 20 people might have read the paper, right?
Wow.
So that's how it is, right? And so there are some people that enjoy the process of just doing research for research's sake, and that's fantastic. I'm not that person. I need to see something real. That's why I left. And so I actually dropped out of this program. Luckily, I'd done enough research to publish with a master's, and I'm very grateful for the PI I had at Hopkins. Great people over there. They even paid for me to do the first year of med school. Like, I owe a lot to that university. I owe a lot to the University of Virginia. They really did really, really good things for me. When I was at the University of Virginia, we had, sorry, what was that?
The Cavaliers. My brother was an assistant basketball coach there. Good program.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, John Paul Jones Arena. That's a great arena.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so owe lots of those universities. They really did a fantastic job educating me and giving me the opportunities to do the research. And even though I didn't appreciate it as much at the time, now that things have kind of gone full circle, I do. So after I left academia, I was looking for something to do that's real, right? Something that has some, real tangible impact in the world. And, I'd always been kind of interested in finance. I never really had the background though. But I had a family friend that was starting an investment bank in Boca Raton, Florida. And I was like, okay, I was 22 at the time. I was like, all right, that sounds sexy. I have no idea what that even is, but it sounds like something different to do, and should still be relatively quantitative. And so I jumped ship and I moved from Baltimore. I packed whatever I could in a 4-door sedan, which wasn't that much. Drove down to Boca Raton, Florida from Baltimore. Never been down here. I'd never been to South Florida before in my life. And set up shop, and I was like, man, this is the most amount of culture shock I'd ever experienced. So I went from living pretty much in the ghetto in Baltimore to looking around, there's these 22-year-olds driving Bentleys. And I'd never even seen a Ferrari. I'd never seen a Ferrari in my life until I came down here.
Wow.
Now they're just everywhere. And it's just like, who are these people? How do they afford this shit? It's not real. Like, so I went from this extreme of just Baltimore, gritty, just so gritty, to coming down here and then just like, this is a whole new world. And so, on the face of things, that's how South Florida kind of is, right? It's like there's a lot of glitz and glam, and you look underneath, and everything is just kind of like held together with Gorilla Tape, right?
Yep.
And I didn't know at the time, but this company that I joined was pretty much just like that. And so the guys that had formed this investment bank, it was pretty much what they set up was a fixed income trading floor. I mean, it was selling bonds, a lot of U.S. Treasury debt, with this ancillary investment banking arm. And the guys that had set this up were former CDO traders that were responsible in large way for the 2008 mortgage crisis. So they went from making like 5-10 grand a day trading this paper to nothing. And so I didn't know that I was getting into bed with these maniacs. And so ended up, I learned a lot. Truth be told, it wasn't a successful operation, but I learned a lot about finance. Took all the, FINRA certifications, but more importantly, I'd ingratiated myself in the community. And what I didn't know at the time was that South Florida is a really rich biotech hub. There's a lot of startup biotech down here. I did not know that at all. So the benefit coming down here was sort of ingratiating myself in this community, going to all the conferences, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how I met Guy Scuderi, the founder of Cytonics. When I eventually left the banking behind me, I had reached out and they were looking for someone new to kind of breathe a little bit of fire into the company, because at the time, this was about mid 2018, Cytonics had about $300K in the bank. They had this drug in an engineering grade, right? It wasn't even produced in GMP grade. They had a published paper with some in vitro experiments showing that it can protect against cartilage degradation. There were some in vivo small animal models. There was no large animal stuff done yet. So it was very much right at the cusp of the drug discovery and development in preclinical stage, right? Not even fully through preclinical.
Well, let's wait. So what's his name? Guy
Scuderi, yeah. Gaetano Scuderi, yeah.
Scuderi. So how did he find you? Like, were you networking out there? Like, trying to raise money, or?
Yeah. So when I was working in banking, yeah. So sorry, I should have clarified that. Yeah. So the mandate of the investment banking, for a middle markets bank is, we're trying to raise, private equity for companies, maybe worth $50 to $100 million, looking to raise 10 to 50 million, 10 to 20 million, something like that. And so it was during that time that I had actually met the former president of the company, and we became friends and colleagues. And so then when I was looking for a new position, like I have, young people from the university call me. I'm on a list so people can talk to me. I talk to young people, and from Hopkins and UVA probably 4 or 5, times a year. And I tell them, like, listen, like, this shit's soul sucking. Like, like, investment banking is not what it was during the bond heyday of the 1980s. You think Wolf of Wall Street? It's not like that. Okay. The money's not there. The level of mental illness still is, though. And so it's like, so anyway, I have some really strong opinions on different things, but it's not really that relevant. But anyway, I left that behind me. It's like, get the fuck out of this. This is, oh, sorry, I shouldn't curse. This is too much.
No, yeah, we curse on this show.
Okay. This is too much, just had to get out. And so ironically, Somehow, once I talked to a guy, and I don't even know if he realized this, but my background wasn't protein engineering. I spent, 8 years, making recombinant proteins, editing them to give them different functions for research purposes in academia, right? For investigative purposes to design assays to, measure this, that, and the other.
Mm.
But what we're doing at Cytonics is the same thing, except engineering them to confer therapeutic function. And I don't even know if he really understood that at the time. But what are the chances, right? So left academia, moved into Wall Street, learned how to raise money, learned how to, all that stuff that's important, right, to be able to run a biotech company, and then somehow came all the way back around to engineering proteins. And
Wow.
so, talk to him, and he's a very interesting guy. So he's a spine surgeon, right? And he founded Cytonics in 2006 after he got into a motorcycle accident, skinned his hands. And so he was like, well, what am I going to do? And we went over to Stanford, started doing translational research with a couple other MD PhDs that are actually some early shareholders, stakeholders in Cytonics. And that's when he discovered the therapeutic potential of A2M. That's when he first started developing the autologous device to pull the A2M out of the body. And then eventually in 2015, we switched to this biopharmaceutical bent. We're actually engineering the A2M molecule ourselves. So, so Guy was the original founder, and he still is the chairman of the board. We've reorganized so that we have myself as the CEO, Louis Hanna, who is the chief scientific officer. He has about a little over 30 years experience in big pharma doing protein engineering. So he's really critical, been the brains behind designing this process of upstream production and downstream purification of this protein. It's very challenging due to the size of the molecule. And we think it's probably the largest recombinant protein that's been purified for drug in a drug development setting. 720 kilodaltons.
So it's technically not a peptide. It's
it's a
actually a
protein.
protein.
Yeah.
I wonder why my PI mentioned peptides. I mean, he's
I
into
mean,
it, so
people kind of group it all in the same thing. I mean, the protein is just a three-dimensional arrangement of peptides. So
yeah, yeah. Interesting. So it's definitely patentable, which is kind of an issue with some
it,
peptides, right?
yeah, so it is, right? So we have 22 patents already. And it covers the medical device technology, that first generation technology using autologous A2M, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that covers the composition of matter of what we're actually producing, right? A2M concentrate that's selectively purified. We're getting rid of other blood proteins, right? Selective concentration. And then the second generation technology, the recombinant variant, we've patented, you can't patent the A2M molecule, right? It's a natural product, but we've patented the gene sequences that we've changed. But we did it in a very intelligent way. It's not actually patenting the gene sequence itself. It's patenting the binding region on the protein that sequence recognizes. Okay. And that's important because anybody that wants to create something that's substantially similar that targets those other proteases will now be infringing on our property, right? So we've created a way
I
to
see.
protect the targets, and we know that those targets, are relevant because we already know that they're the ones that are responsible for the cartilage damage. So
This is for osteoarthritis,
for
primarily of the
osteoarthritis,
knee, but it could work for the hip. It could work for
yeah. So
like,
any joint with articular cartilage. So yeah, hip, fingers, elbows, back. We've done
mm.
all those with the autologous device, which we call it the autologous protease inhibitor concentrate system, right?
How is it a
Autologous.
device? I'm still a little bit confused. Like, where's the device for?
Yeah, so the device that was commercialized in 2015, and it's predicated on platelet-rich plasma. It employs a proprietary filtration system to basically take a PRP formulation, get rid of all the inflammatory mediators, cytokines, and
Okay.
growth factors too. There's a lot of inflammatory stuff in PRP formulations. Based on the fact that A2M is so big, 720 kilodaltons, we used a high molecular weight filtration system to be able to pull the A2M out and get rid of everything else. And that we
Ah,
can then inject directly into the joint. We've been over 8,000 people have been treated, and it works very, very well for some people. Some people come in about one injection a year. Royce Gracie, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So Guy
yeah.
Scuderi is also a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, and so he knows a lot of the guys down here.
Don't mess with
South
him,
Florida is
man.
a mecca for what's that?
I said, don't mess with him in that case.
Yeah, South Florida is a mecca for MMA, and so
Yeah.
Hoist Gracie has been treated by us. I actually started training jiu-jitsu with him like 5 years ago, and then that's just become the rest of my life besides Cytonics. So it's funny how that happens. It's like,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's a cool culture down here. Yeah, so Hoist Gracie's been treated. The Eagles football team's been treated. Their the defensive side of their team.
Really? Like
Yeah,
on the knees or just any joints?
I'm not exactly sure which ones.
Okay.
To be honest with you, they're kind of secretive about it. We
Yeah.
just knew that our distributor was going there and training
Okay.
the doctors. That's all they would tell.
So they're just using it off label wherever their doctors
Yeah,
feel
it's
like it's
all it's
appropriate.
all well, technically there is no on label because it's 510K, right? So
It's device,
yeah,
yeah.
it's predicated on PRP, but for all intents and purposes, yeah, it's used off label everywhere. I mean, you see people
Sure.
putting PRP in their face.
No, I had it in my head, in my scalp.
You
I
had
had the
how'd that work? Did it
dermatologist.
work? Did it inflame everything
I don't feel like it did work, but I would do it. I had like 2 or 3 rounds.
in your scalp?
Yeah, for hair regeneration.
Did it work? You
I don't
said
feel like
no.
it did. No,
Huh?
no.
Yeah. Who did that?
One of my other PIs actually, in San Bernardino, California. He's actually a cool guy. I gotta introduce you to him too. If
Sure.
you need
You
multiple
might want to
sites, we'll
try the
have him.
APIC product.
Yeah,
You
no,
might
seriously,
want to try it.
he actually does this in clinic a lot. He does it for on face for women, hair loss, knee pain. He actually would be a good contact for you too, just like Dr. Smith.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Happy to talk to him. We've out licensed the exclusive manufacturing and distribution rights to actually two different entities. One in the human market. They're a large multinational. They're actually based in Canada. Carestream USA. They're a big multinational manufacturer, distributor, medical license in the human market, and then another in the veterinary market. So what we're finding is that it works very well. This autologous treatment, autologous A2M for horses, and which is really exciting. And there are a lot
Wow.
of veterinarians that are using them on both what they call like performance horses as well as work horses. And so that's pretty exciting. And again, this is the autologous product, right? We're purifying it out of the animal or the person for delivery, right? So it's very easy to use that, right? You don't have to it doesn't have to, be filed as an IND or anything like that. But we expect, once we have this, the recombinant, the Site 108 A2M variant, ready to go, it could very well also. A2M is highly conserved across mammalian species. And so we think that, we've already done large animal model using this human base, the gene that we're modified is a human gene. And in a canine model of osteoarthritis, we didn't see any sort of, deleterious, any sort of real adverse effect that was related to the drug itself. We saw some local swelling due to some of the tween in the formulation buffer. Not a big deal. We can bring that down, but there was nothing related to the drug itself. And so that's a human protein in a canine model, right? And we didn't see anything. So it stands to reason, the logic here is that, well, you start putting it in humans, it's probably going to be okay. And one other important thing to know is when we did those safety experiments, we actually dosed these animals subcutaneously at a 10x proposed dose. And that wasn't random. That was something the FDA actually asked us to do. You have to keep in mind that when we actually dose this in humans, it'll be tenfold reduced in the knee, in the joint. So not even exposed to the systemic circulation
Yeah,
nearly as much. Joints are relatively vascular
that's
in the
systemic. Yeah.
membrane, encapsulated. And so it's like, based upon the safety data we've got so far, we feel very confident moving forward that, we should be okay. And, what really matters now is signs of efficacy, disease modification, right? Because basically
Yeah.
everything, the only available treatments for osteoarthritis right now are painkillers and corticosteroids and viscose supplementation, where they'll put a little bit of viscous fluid, hyaluronic acid, into the joint as a temporary cushion to mimic cartilage. But these are all palliative measures, right? They're band-aid solutions. And so our goal with our Site 108 drug is it will actually be able to modify the pathogenesis of osteoarthritis by cutting off, the way it works, right, on a molecular level.
I'm real excited about biotech industry as a whole. Unfortunately, and a lot of people are fearful, especially of these small cap biotechs, considering the potential recessionary environment we're heading into. I had a CEO of another small cap biotech on, basically saying, you know what, it's going to be big problems here going forward. And you
Mhm.
guys are in a unique position because you have something that's already commercialized. You have revenue. You guys are not a publicly traded company, right? As far as
No,
I'm
no, we're
aware of.
still private. Yeah.
Still private. What are your thoughts, somebody that has been in that space of finance?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on the current environment and how your company will persevere through this and
Right.
do a clinical research study, which is not
Yeah.
cheap. Not
Yeah,
cheap.
no, no, it's a complicated thing, right? So when you think about things, when you think about the markets in general, you should really break it down into two sets of thinking. One is a greater macroeconomic view. What's going on in the world, and how are in the world, in the economy, and how are central banks responding globally, and how is that going to inform investors' appetite for different asset classes? Biotech risky growth biotech stocks being a very niche part. Okay.
High risk, high
Then the
reward.
second line of thinking is within that niche, what's going on? What are the catalysts in the industry? What are the hot disease areas? What are people focused on? Okay, so in the general macroeconomic view of things, right, we find ourselves in a high inflationary environment in which the Federal Reserve is committed to doing whatever possible in terms of raising interest rates to try and cut it down. Well, you raise interest rates, bond prices fall, capital is going to flow out of equities in general, especially high risk growth stocks, into more favorable assets, into the bond market, etc. That's not always true. Sometimes you see prices fall, and we've been seeing this too with equities and bonds falling at the same time. But you have a diversion of capital away from high risk, growth assets like biotech. Crypto is the best indicator of risk appetite. Crypto is the ultimate risk asset. So when you saw in 2000 or so, 2009, yeah, right when the pandemic hit, all that fiscal stimulus, or sorry, not fiscal stimulus, but monetary stimulus with the Federal Reserve slashing interest rates, injecting cash into the economy, and there was just all this liquidity. All that money went into crypto. That basically acted as like a liquidity sponge, right? And it basically was an indication that, wow, there's so much money and there's so much risk tolerance. It's all flowing in. Well, that's stopped now. So, all the money went out, crypto hammered, growth stocks hammered, and we find ourselves in a situation where people are anticipating a recession, right? And you can count on there being a lot of uncertainty in the near term until the Federal Reserve has decided to stop hiking rates, and everyone feels confident that they now have a better grasp on the situation, and equities are fully valued, and there's not a lot of speculation about what's going to happen. And so within the biotech sector in particular, in 2020 or so, I think it really started in like 2018. You had a record number of IPOs of biotech companies that didn't even have clinical data, and sometimes they would go public at insane valuations of 60 million, 80 million, 100
Yeah,
million, right?
yeah.
And well, there's always going to be a come to Jesus moment. At that time, the market had this enormous appetite, and they would buy anything. And that was only made worse by what happened during COVID, and all of the heightened risk tolerance that was given by the Federal Reserve, just injecting money and slashing interest rates and making everyone think that, oh wow, everything's great, everyone's buying crypto, and it's a massive bull market. No one even really understands why. Nobody cares, even though businesses are being destroyed. Whatever. There's a come to Jesus moment, and that's where we find ourselves now, where that liquidity, that risk appetite for biotech stocks in that early stage is gone. you're not going to be able to go public at that early of a stage. And even if you are, it's not going to be for a valuation that you want. So what does that mean? That means a lot of these companies, these microcap biotech stocks, they find themselves in a position where, they favorably have access to the public markets. But if they are going to raise capital again, they're just going to dilute their companies into oblivion. Well, one of the benefits of staying private is that our valuation is not subject to the, irrationality or variations of the public markets and their sentiment. And so we can go out and raise capital again at a valuation that we think is more appropriate and that isn't going to dilute our shareholders down to nothing. Now, we also reserve the, ability to, at some point in the future, actually go public and be able to raise that next tranche of capital, let's say for a phase 2 trial, 15 to 20 million tranche of capital. So, we find ourselves in a position right now where, we're going to be able to, fund a phase 1 study, without having to subject ourselves, to the scrutiny and the process of actually listing on a public exchange.
Mhm. Well, the fact that you guys have revenue, right? And that you don't have a high burn rate right now, because are you guys in clinical trials right now, or?
No, we're not in clinical trials. Our burn rate is mostly related to the manufacturing.
Mhm.
Um, the revenue that we get from the product is good. It's definitely not enough to support a clinical trial program. And so, we are still, using investor dollars, but it is unusual for, a biotech company to actually, have revenue. To me, most importantly, the commercial success of this autologous product is a testament to A2M as a therapeutic protein
Mm.
and de-risk the further development of our synthetic version, the Site 108.
Mm. Yeah, my theory after talking to a few biotech startup CEOs, I'm in Yuma, Arizona, but we're pretty close to San Diego, and that's actually where I used to live, Orange County, San Diego. That's a huge biotech hub as well. So, I'm talking to a lot of these small cap guys, and some of them actually got acquired or signed huge partnership deals with big pharma right before we started getting hints of the recession. And I feel like big pharma at the end of this, big pharma is going to get bigger because they're going to see small cap companies that are desperate and say, "Hey, you
Mm-hmm.
know what? Here's some money. Let's have a partnership agreement, or we're just gonna acquire you outright." And at valuations that they think are safe to them. And I don't know if that's good or bad thing. I mean, I love working with small biotechs. I think the science is more pure. I think that the intentions are usually more pure, and the bigger you get, the messier it gets, the more political it gets, and the less fun, honestly, it is to work with those kind of companies. So that's one of the reasons why I was so excited about reaching out to you guys, even if it's not for another year or more, but just to plant those seeds, because I think this space thrives on small biotechs. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what would happen if there's no more small biotechs in this industry? Like, what would Pfizer and J&J actually do?
Yeah, I mean, this phenomenon of big pharma being highly acquisitive to be able to stock their pipelines with early stage drug assets is something that I think we really saw pick up in the 2010s, and it's just simply a more viable financial option to acquire or license the development rights and do in-house research. So what would they do? Well, I think you're right. Like, we're already seeing, the second half of 2022, the M&A picked up in the space. And I wrote something on LinkedIn you can check out about
Hmm.
biotech buyouts and what we should see happen.
Oh, I'll read
Pfizer
into
has
it.
already been, because Pfizer has all that Paxlovid and COVID vaccine money, and they've already engaged in a couple deals. And there more being announced every day. And so the first half of 2022, everything slumped. 2019 was like the banner year for deal making. Usually you should expect in biopharma somewhere between 100 billion to maybe 250 billion dollars worth of acquisitions every year. And I think 2019 was towards the higher end of that. Don't quote me, but you can look some of that up and some of the things that are written. And second half of 2022 is definitely picking up. And yeah, there are a lot of big pharmaceutical companies that are sitting on very rich balance sheets, and they're going to have the cash to spend. And
Off of
I feel like right
all-time
now there's
highs,
what's that?
off of all-time highs.
Yeah,
Pfizer, all-time high revenue
yeah,
last
they
year.
were they were rich. They have I think with just Paxlovid, I think they made something like 30 billion. I think they made 30 billion or so, something on the order of 30 billion with
Mhm.
Paxlovid alone during this crisis. And so yeah, we should see a lot of activity, which for small biotechs like us is a good thing. What are these big pharmaceutical companies waiting for? Well, they're waiting for valuations to come down even more, right? And so we'll see. They are not necessarily better at timing the market environment than anyone else. And so maybe by the time they start, making bids, things are already on the upslope. And so
And they're
I'm
less
not,
efficient too. I think that's one of the things that keeps this industry going is the small cap biotech like you guys, for example, you just said 15, 20 million for you guys for a phase 2. You can take that 15 million a lot further than a Pfizer can. You have way less fat. I mean, they have so many middle layers of management where that 15 mil gets eaten up, and you guys, I assume, don't. You
yeah.
know, the efficiency increases the smaller the um the market cap, I think.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know about the capabilities, but definitely the efficiency. And when you're a research site owner or a CRO, all the CROs are coming off of record years as well, 2021. And me at our site, we've never been busier in clinical research. We're just getting study offer after study offer. So what do you predict, like as a small cap CEO, what do you predict is going to happen to the overall clinical research ecosystem? Do you think CROs are going to continue to get bigger? Do you think the industry is going to remain busy despite the
Well,
struggles of some
to
small
be honest
caps?
with you, I think you know more about that than me. What I've been reading is that the CRO space has become this monster, right? Where they're eating a lot of the fees, and from talking, my experience in this would be the first clinical trial that I'll actually manage, right? And so all the information that I get really comes from my board. We have some really senior executives.
I'll send you our book afterwards. I'll get your
Yeah, no, I've
address.
been watching your lectures. I'm 2 hours in already on the 5 hour one. So
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
learning a lot from your podcast, your YouTube videos. So it's very useful for me. But what I'm understanding is that 50% of the cost of the trial can go to management. And
Yeah.
for a small company that can be make or break, right? When you're raising capital on this iterative way where the next capital raise is predicated on the data that was acquired from the previous one, right? And so you're running on this thin line of ice, right? And so having to pay a couple $1 million to CRO for a phase 1 trial can certainly be make or break. And so what I'm understanding is that just generally, the more regulation you have, the more consultants have to come in, right? And then
Hmm.
it creates jobs for everybody, and that's just the natural course of everything. Not just
And
in this industry; it doesn't matter where. That's why lawyers have jobs. Lawyers don't need to be
exactly.
there for most things,
Yeah.
just because things are highly regulated. That's
We
it. That's the only
created a
reason.
whole new industry or sub industry there. So the problem really with the CROs and there's only like five major ones. And then there's like a long tail of ones you've never heard of, like mine, for example. But 5 or 6 major ones. And they know, like they're busy. They know that they're gonna get work regardless. And they have preferred vendor agreements with the big pharma. So when Pfizer approaches them, when Janssen approaches them, they actually sign long year contracts with them, and they're given their A team of CRAs, monitors, data managers. They're given like the A team. When a company like yours come around, they're given like the C or D team, like the
Yeah.
junior varsity team. So it's a real, and they don't care because they don't expect you to be around. So if they burn your bridge, they don't, honestly, they don't care. They're gonna
Yeah.
tell you differently, but I'm telling you like how it is for the most part.
Yeah, no, that's what I've been told too. And that's why for our preclinical work, we went with a small CRO. We didn't go with like, Charles Rivers or Lonza or one of these bigger
Much
entities.
better,
Because we
much
talked to him.
better.
I talked to him, you know.
Yeah, and they'll
Right, they're not
tell
going to
you.
tell you that you're getting the B team, but yeah, and so we know that partnering with them will double the cost of everything, and we're not necessarily going to be a priority, and so yeah, it's kind of sucks, but that's
It's
what
the
it is.
nature of where we're at. So it's gonna be interesting to follow you guys. I feel like next time we do this, because we can do this for 3 hours, but next time if you have time, we can go live and get a bunch of questions from LinkedIn, from YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I'm sure a lot of people will connect with you after this, but what is it about clinical research? Now you're in the planning mode, right? Like, where are you guys right now as far as
We're
planning
preparing
your
the
next step?
IND for submission.
Okay, okay. So after that, you're gonna think of what, the phase 1, phase 2? You're not thinking phase 2 yet, right? You're gonna think
No, just
phase 1.
phase one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it is going to be designed a little differently. It's not going to be in healthy subjects. We want to try and develop it as open label because I think there's some ethical issues around giving people injections in their knee. First of all, they're suffering patients, giving them saline injections in their knee. A big needle, like it's relatively invasive. It's not just like a little IV thing or something like that. And then actually collecting some evidence that would suggest at least on a biological, let's say surrogate level of efficacy, something that can show some signs of disease modification. Well, how would we
I
measure
see.
that? Well, we want to see a reduction in protease activity. There's different ways to do that. So, we want to design something that, even though we don't believe it's going to give us statistically significant results, that there's some trend to look at, because that's going to be important when we go back out to the market and say, hey, who wants to partner with us, or who wants to help fund this, or whatever. Like, there needs to be something, and we understand that phase one data set, while good and necessary, it makes things a little difficult. That was different 2 years ago. You could probably shop anything you wanted out. It all has to do with the market's appetite. This is not a pure scientific endeavor in any way, shape, or form. It's a financial endeavor just as much as scientific.
Yeah, you're unique because you started in academia, publishing, strong science background, obviously. You got thrown into finance, and now you're thrown into clinical research. We have a lot of people in your situation who, finance came last to them. They're
Mm-hmm.
learning it now, and they're
Yeah.
learning it the hard way. I mean, I know several people like really well that are in that situation right now as well. They know clinical research great. They don't necessarily need to know the science that well because they have people on the team that know it, and now they have to learn the finance.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, most of the role of, a biotech CEO or even COO is, raising money. So much of it
Mm.
is just, outward communication, interfacing with the public and the market and stuff like that. And so while knowing the science is definitely important, honestly having, and that's why, as an investor in a company, you want to see that as the company grows, that the chief medical officer, or let's say the PhD or MD that founded the company, they move away from the CEO role. They're the founder and board member or chairman. You pull somebody in with Wall Street experience to run a company. And so it's a big red flag if a company goes past an angel round or seed round and doesn't have somebody with Wall Street experience as the CEO.
Wow.
It's a
Interesting.
common mistake.
Interesting. I always thought that, but you're right. I always thought that having a science first CEO would be better, but you're saying maybe not.
No, in the very beginning, yeah, you're selling the science to a very, very small group of people.
Yeah.
And then after that, you're not selling the science, you're selling an investment opportunity whose value and probability of return is predicated on good science, but it's also predicated on a number of other things that are non-science related.
Mm.
And you definitely want some, and it would help if they're like a biotech banker or something, that because obviously not somebody maybe that comes from consumer products or something like that. I'm not just saying anybody that touched Wall Street or was a trader, not like
Yeah.
that. but somebody that, maybe has M&A experience in the space. They work for a big investment bank or
I
even a
gotcha.
small investment bank, like myself, but just kind of understands the capital market side of things, how people are thinking, the way they talk. Like, you have to, understand some of this lingo and stuff, because, bankers will try to just, run circles around, and, even if they feel like they can sell your stock, like take you public on a small exchange, something like that, and sell your stock to a retail group, the chances of them being able to support your share price after that happens are almost zero. And so, they'll collect a commission on the offering, they'll sell the stock, and then what'll happen? Well, you have your IPO, nice little bump in share price, and then boom, it'll just collapse, and it'll
Yeah.
stay suppressed. It's what happens. I've seen it so many times.
There's two CEOs. Well, we've had a few on, but there's two in particular that I'd like to introduce you to. Travis Mickle, he's actually in Florida from
Oh,
Chem
okay.
Farm, KMPH. He's the inventor of Vyvanse, and
Oh,
he sold that to Shire in his first company, and now he's the CEO of the new company, KMPH, Chem Farm, and they created a Astaris for ADHD, got that approved, still at the helm. So he's an example of like science first, but he learned how to navigate Wall Street. And then
yeah,
a
yeah. I'd
guy
like to definitely like to
I
talk
will
to.
introduce you. He's in Florida, somewhere in like northern Florida. And then Brian Culley from Lineage Cell Therapeutics. They just signed a huge deal with Genentech, I believe. He called it like the Amazon of gene therapy for eye diseases. I'll introduce you to both of them. Those are examples that come to my head of like science first founders that managed to do it. Which kind of makes it even more impressive after what you've just said.
Yeah, it can be difficult. And I mean, so a lot of this has to do with network, right? Like, if
Mm,
you're well connected and you know people, it doesn't matter where you come from, right?
mm.
I don't know these guys. So
But
I
you're
don't know if you
science
guys are. I
first
have no
too.
idea who you're talking about. So I
You're
have no idea where they came from. I can't speak to it at all. But yeah, if you don't come from, if you came from academia with
yeah,
pure science, don't know anybody at Translational Medicine Accelerator, don't know anybody in Wall Street, don't know anybody in industry, you're
just a
not
straight
doing
nerd.
this.
Just a straight nerd.
You're just a straight nerd. You're not doing it. You have to
Yeah,
pull in somebody that
yeah,
knows. So I don't know these guys, what their experience, fantastic for them. I'd love to talk to them. I'd love to, that they're
yeah.
doing cool stuff. Absolutely love to talk to them. I can't speak to their experience.
I would say you're science first too, right? Wouldn't you consider, because you came from academia first,
Yeah,
publishing?
I would say, yeah, science first, but I had the benefit of learning some of the Wall Street stuff first,
Mm,
which was absolutely 100% necessary.
mm.
So, if fantastic for people that don't need that, or I don't really understand how it's done, and you not get ripped off by bankers or something like that,
I think
but who
they
knows,
do.
maybe I'm good people are using, maybe you're just smarter
No,
than
I think they actually do, and somehow they still like this. The tech just works. I think that just kind of, if you can survive and time it right, because they both did it in a great economy, right? Like that was
yeah.
very favorable, very forgiving. Not so sure if it would work in this decade.
Yeah, so much of that has to do with timing. If, if,
Yeah.
if there's if the market is hungry for this type of stuff,
Mm,
and these are all risk assets, right? They're hungry for it. It's like, it's a great time. So and that's my previous point is like, so much of this has to do with where do you fit in the greater macroeconomic cycle, and this is arguably the worst time probably to be in biotech in
wow.
a long time, and it was ironically predicated by one of the best times just a couple of years ago, right? And
Yeah.
that's what happened, right? There's always going to be a come to Jesus moment. And if people act irrationally and fund companies at insanely high valuations, at very low levels of development, really early stage, it's irrational, and there will always be a come to Jesus moment. And then what happens? People usually overcorrect. Now they're extremely risk averse, and it makes things difficult. But that's also one of the benefits of keeping your company private and going to more sophisticated capital sources, whether that be venture capital or a very focused family office. It's the private markets and public markets are not completely untethered, but there certainly is a little bit of discontinuity and they don't move in sync with each other. And so, we've been pretty successful with this equity crowdfunding. We've done a few rounds of it, and total since we've come to the company, we'll have raised about, once this one closes, about $8 million. So,
Wow.
over that, and so it can be a viable funding option for companies that want to stay private.
See, and that's a whole nother topic. This is why we have to go live. Let's say 8 million. We talked privately earlier. I think you can probably do it for 5. Your phase 1, maybe 2 to 5. But you're literally putting all your eggs in one basket, like one site, one CRO. So that's gotta be a very stressful decision when you come to that. And I'd like to kind of get into your thought process as we get closer to that. I mean, we don't have to cover that in this interview. My last question would be, do you think we're at the bottom of this biotech bear market, or do you think it's just beginning?
Oh, yeah. So that's a question that everybody wants to know, right? Well, I'll
Yeah.
tell you what. Back in I believe it was August, late July, early August, we saw a double bottom with the XBI index. The XBI is an index for it's a biotech ETF, right? And so they're all pre-revenue companies, and there's some certain market cap requirements for it too. So they're not your Pfizer's, right? We're not looking at your Pfizer's and Johnson and Johnson's. And so we saw a double bottom, and it looks like it's kind of rebounded. Let me see what it looks like. Let me see what it looks like over the last month here. So last month, down 3.72%. The general market, as quantified by the S&P, down 7.92%. All right, over the last 6 months, the S&P was down 20%, and the XBI was down 10.34%. So you can see it's outperforming, even though it's negative, it's outperforming the general market. Okay. I think if we haven't seen a bottom, we're pretty much there. You're never going to time the bottom perfectly, but we're pretty much there. I think for all intents and purposes, it's fine to treat this as the bottom and be like, okay, it might drop a little bit more. It's nothing to be that concerned about. And healthcare in general is a leading indicator. So once it starts moving, and we start seeing some more positive growth, I think it'll be an indicator that the market has now more appetite for growth stocks and more risky asset classes.
Which healthcare stocks would you recommend following for leading indicators?
That I don't know.
This is not financial advice, but
Yeah,
would it be
it's
like
not financial advice whatsoever?
could we look at Pfizer and J&J,
mean,
or would it be like United Health, or like?
I don't know about any specific stocks. I mean, that's why looking at an index is good, right? In terms of a biotech, a good, or so you're talking about Pfizer and Johnson Johnson, something like that, right? So that would be a pharmaceutical index. I have to look and see. I look at the XBI just because it's a little bit more relevant to to biotechs and pre-revenue companies.
Okay, yeah, because there seem to be two schools of thought on this. One is, no one's denying we're in a recession, or at least at the beginning. But some people are saying, well, we're close to the bottom. Others are saying we're nowhere near the bottom. This will be a depression. So
I think that's an overreaction.
Really?
I mean, when you're talking about things like recession and depression too, we're talking about economies, right? And while the state of the economy definitely impacts where capital is going to flow, it's possible. Like, let's say that the Fed increases interest rates, tamps down inflation, and then we enter a recessionary period, and then they start injecting more liquidity into the economy and they slash interest rates again or something like that. Now there's a ton of capital to go around. So technically you could still be in a recession, and money can be flowing into the markets in kind of irrational ways. Look at COVID. I mean, entire cities were shut down, entire municipalities were shut down. I mean, that's a depression, right? And even then, there was the central banks had injected so much liquidity into the economy that flowed into the capital markets. They were able to see irrational things.
You're right.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily like tethered exactly. Everything's going to move in 1-2 step. So much of this has to do. like economic output matters, obviously, to how you value stocks, how much money there is to be able to move and flow into markets, flow into different asset classes. But there are situations where, you know, you can have enough liquidity available and the economy still look really shaky and be able to see some pretty irrational looking movements in the market.
Joey, there's so much we can discuss. We have to go live. It's great when I get people like you on the show that have passion and enthusiasm for this stuff, and you kind of bring on another layer to this science, and we get to see behind the scenes, you know, the inner workings of a really
Sure.
small
Yeah.
cap, and hopefully we could follow your career as the company gets bigger and, you know, has another commercialized product, and it would really be cool for the audience to follow. So thank you so much for coming on. Joey's LinkedIn is underneath this video and also in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast, and we'll probably do a live stream soon, so get your questions ready and we'll probably set it up soon,
All
Joey.
right. Yeah, Dan, thank you so much. I'm gonna keep watching some of your YouTube videos.
I'll send you
Taking
the book.
notes.
I'll get your address. Thank you, everybody. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye bye.
Bye bye.